$250 million.
Yeah.
That is a number that just, stops you in your tracks. We are not talking about some legacy broadcasting network with a skyscraper in Manhattan and thousands of employees.
No, not at all.
We're talking about a comedian, a microphone, and a guy named Jamie.
And, well, a significant amount of elk meat, if we're being completely accurate.
Right.
But you're right. The scale of the Joe Rogan Experience is almost difficult to comprehend. I mean, even for people who work in media, it's a behemoth.
It's become this singular entity that can, I don't know, move stock markets, force presidential candidates to change their entire campaign strategy.
Oh, yeah. And spark global boycotts, all just by uploading an MP3 file. It's kind of staggering.
It really is the ultimate disruption story.
Yeah.
And today, we aren't just, recounting the history. We're really trying to look at the mechanics of this machine.
Right.
We need to figure out how a sitcom actor and a UFC commentator built what is arguably the most influential media platform on Earth, period.
And maybe more importantly, what his success signals about the death of traditional authority. We have a massive stack of sources here.
Yeah.
I mean, business analyses of the Spotify deals, plural
Right.
deals, academic papers on what they call the kingmaker effect, the whole timeline of all the controversies, data on the demographics. It's a lot.
So we're going to trace this whole arc from the snowy laptop screens of 2009 all the way to the political bunker of 2026.
It's quite a journey.
But before we get to the presidential interviews and all that, we have to go back to the beginning. And I mean the very beginning. December 24, 2009.
Christmas Eve. A humble beginning, if there ever was one. It started as a live weekly broadcast on Ustream.
Ustream.
And for our younger listeners or anyone who didn't live on the internet in the late 2000s, Ustream was the Wild West.
Oh, totally. It was live. It was super grainy.
And it was so prone to crashing.
All the time.
The sources describe it as basically two guys bullshitting in front of laptops. And bullshitting really is the technical term here.
It is.
There was no format. None. Zero. I mean, Rogan wasn't trying to build an empire here. He was just trying to figure out how to use the internet.
And he wasn't alone. He had Brian Redban.
Yes. We have to pause on Redban for a second because I think the popular narrative often just overlooks him, or people think of him as just the silly sidekick.
Yeah, the guy making the sound effect.
Exactly. But if you look at the history, he was really the technical architect, wasn't he?
He absolutely was. Our sources say Brian Redban was working at a Gateway 2000 computer store in Ohio before he linked up with Rogan.
A self-taught video editor.
Mm-hmm.
Rogan originally hired him to basically film his life, make content for his website, that kind of thing. But Redban was the one who had the insight. He said, hey, these conversations you're having in the green rooms at comedy clubs, we should just broadcast that.
So the unstructured nature of the show, that was a feature, not a bug, right from the very start.
Precisely. And the aesthetic was famously terrible.
Oh, it was awful.
I was looking at some screenshots from those early days.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember that animated snowflake overlay on the video?
Yes. It looked like a MySpace page had come to life. It was cheap, it was buggy, it was charming in a way.
They actually brought that snowflake effect back as a joke for episode 1000 and I think 674 as well. But that lack of polish is so crucial to understanding why it worked.
How so?
Well, there was no producer in their ear telling them to wrap it up. There was no hard out for commercials, no suits breathing down their necks. It was just dead air, technical difficulties, and raw, unfiltered conversation.
Speaking of commercials, the sponsorship history is, I think, the perfect lens into just how niche this whole thing was at the start.
Oh, absolutely. The first sponsor wasn't Squarespace or ZipRecruiter or, any of the blue chip brands we hear now.
No, it was Fleshlight.
A sex toy company.
And that alone is pretty funny, but the follow-up is even better.
And this is the kicker, which really tells you everything about the business mindset at the time. Fleshlight withdrew their sponsorship in 2012.
Right, and their reasoning was,
They claimed they had saturated the market.
that just seems like such an incredible miscalculation in hindsight.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But it tells you who they thought the audience was.
Mm-hmm.
They thought the audience was this fixed circle of, 10,000 internet nerds.
Right.
They had no concept that this show would eventually be reaching tens, hundreds of millions of people. Their thinking was, okay, every guy who listens to this podcast and wants one of our products already has one. We're done here.
It also shows that corporate America just wouldn't touch them.
Not with a 10-foot pole.
It was too risky. It was just guys talking about drugs and fighting and aliens.
Exactly. It wasn't brand safe. And that lack of corporate interest allowed them to grow without any oversight, without any guardrails.
But as the audience started to get bigger, the infrastructure, it started to buckle. They were doing multiple 3-hour shows a week. Red Band was just overwhelmed.
Right. The show was officially named the Joe Rogan Experience in August 2010, which was a nod to the Jimi Hendrix Experience, which is a cool detail.
It is, yeah.
But it was still running like a garage project. It was very amateur.
And this brings us to the first really major pivot point in the show's history, the shift to professionalism. You just can't run a global empire with a laptop and a snowflake filter.
No. This is the era where the show moves to YouTube. The powerful JRE account starts up in 2013. But the real game changer is the personnel switch.
Right.
As the show grew, like you said, Red Band just couldn't handle the technical load and all the production requirements by himself. And that's when Jamie Vernon comes in.
Young Jamie. This happens around 2012, 2013. So how did changing the producer change the product? Because usually the producer is invisible. You don't know who produces the nightly news.
That's a great point. Jamie Vernon professionalized the workflow without sanitizing the vibe.
Okay, that's a key distinction.
A huge one. He stabilized the audio and video as they moved from Rogan's house to the Ice House Comedy Club and then into that private studio in Woodland Hills.
Which a lot of fans would call the classic JRE era, the brick wall background.
That's the one. But technically what Jamie became was the show's external hard drive.
The Jamie pull that up function.
Exactly. The birth of that phrase. We'll get into the mechanics of why that's so important later, but just strictly speaking about the show's evolution, Jamie allowed Rogan to focus 100% on the conversation.
Well, someone else handled the fact-checking and the tech side of things.
Right. And this set the stage for the explosive growth that led up to 2020.
2020, the year everything changed. I mean, the pandemic, obviously, but for the media landscape, that Spotify deal was a seismic event.
It was the moment podcasting stopped being a kind of hobbyist medium and became a high-stakes asset class. In May of 2020, Rogan announces this exclusive licensing deal with Spotify. The estimates at the time put it around $200 million.
And the market validation was instant.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Spotify's stock jumped 7% the next day. Wall Street looked at this and said, okay, audio is the next major battleground.
But we have to look at the trade-off here, because this wasn't just a paycheck. It was a really fundamental change in how the internet works, or how it was supposed to work.
You're talking about the walled garden.
Exactly.
For its entire first decade, JRE was on RSS feeds. It was open distribution. You could listen on Apple Podcasts, on Overcast, on a web browser, anywhere.
And when he went exclusive with Spotify, that feed was just cut off.
Gone. You had to download the Spotify app. There's no other way to listen to new episodes.
And the full video episodes were pulled from YouTube. They only left up short clips.
Which was a massive, massive risk. I mean, history is full of creators who went behind an exclusive wall and then just faded into obscurity because they lost their organic reach.
And for a little while, it looked like that might happen to Rogan.
It did. The viral factor definitely dropped off because those full video episodes just weren't shareable on YouTube anymore. If something crazy happened in hour 3 of an episode, you couldn't just link it to a friend. You had to tell them, go to Spotify, scrub to 2 hours and 47 minutes.
It's a lot more friction.
A lot more. And this whole shift coincided with the physical move.
Right, from LA to Austin, Texas.
Which changed the whole aesthetic of the show entirely. He built that new studio, the one that looks like a kind of sci-fi bunker with the red neon lights.
Some people called it the Red Pill Studio.
Yeah, and that name kind of stuck. It signaled this psychological shift away from Hollywood, away from Los Angeles sensibilities, and into this sort of independent, contrarian fortress in the middle of Texas.
But then you fast forward to February 2024, and the strategy just pivots again. A new deal, reportedly for $250 million.
But the exclusivity is gone.
Which is fascinating.
It's a fascinating admission by Spotify, really. They realize that in the modern attention economy, reach is more valuable than exclusivity.
So they just opened the gates back up.
They opened the gates, the show went back on Apple Podcasts, full videos went back on YouTube. They decided they'd rather sell ads against a massive, ubiquitous global audience than try to force every single one of those people into their own app.
So in a sense, the walled garden strategy, it failed.
I think you could say that, yeah. It proved that you just cannot cage a beast this big. To be relevant, to be Joe Rogan, he needs to be everywhere.
Okay, so that's the timeline. From a laptop in a garage to a $250 million non-exclusive licensing deal. But let's get into the product itself, because on paper, this show shouldn't work.
It violates every single rule of broadcasting.
Seriously, we live in the TikTok era. Attention spans are supposedly 15 seconds long. Corporate media tells us people can't focus on anything.
Right.
And yet here are millions of people listening to a guy talk for 4, sometimes 5 hours straight. Why? What is the appeal?
I think it works because it violates the rules. Our sources call it the anti-soundbite.
The anti-soundbite? I like that.
If you watch traditional cable news, a guest, even a brilliant expert, gets, what, maybe 4 minutes to explain a complex geopolitical issue?
At most, yeah.
They have to speak in these rehearsed bullet points. There's absolutely no time for nuance or, for thinking out loud.
Whereas on JRE, you have the luxury of the deep dive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's meta, but it's true. It allows for ideas to be fully unpacked. You hear the pauses. You hear the guests correct themselves. You hear the struggle to articulate a thought. It feels human.
It's the audio equivalent of just hanging out. Rogan says it all the time. I'm just talking with my friends.
And that hangout factor creates an incredibly potent parasocial relationship.
Explain that a little.
You listen for so many hours, hundreds of hours, that you feel like you know him. You know his quirks, you know his stories about his dog, his obsession with saunas and kettlebells. You feel like you're sitting there at the table with him.
And Jamie Vernon is the listener's avatar at that table.
That is a great way to put it. Jamie isn't just in the background checking audio levels. When Rogan or a guest makes some kind of wild claim or mentions a news story,
Jamie, pull that up.
and suddenly it's on screen, it turns the act of a Google search into a spectator sport. It adds this layer of immediate verification, or sometimes, immediate debunking, that you just do not get in traditional radio. It's dynamic.
The other factor has to be the sheer variety. It's not just one vertical. It isn't a sports show or a politics show.
No, it's a variety show in the truest sense of the word. One day you'll have a comedian like Joey Diaz on, telling these stories from the 80s that are absolutely unprintable.
And then the very next day, it's Elon Musk or Bernie Sanders.
Or a quantum physicist. Or an expert on mushrooms. Or an archaeologist. This variety is what keeps the audience from burning out. You never know what you're going to get.
You also have all the different formats that have spun off from the main show.
Right, it's a whole universe now.
Yeah.
You have the fight companions where they just live stream themselves watching UFC fights. You've got the dedicated MMA shows, and then you have the chaotic Protect Our Parks episodes.
Those are the ones with Shane Gillis, Mark Normand, and Ari Shaffir.
Which are, for all intents and purposes, drunken hangouts broadcast to millions of people.
But that's the appeal. It's that fly-on-the-wall fantasy. You feel like you're getting to hear how these comedians actually talk to each other when they're not on stage, when the guard is down.
Absolutely. But this broad net of guests and topics, this is what leads us to that concept of the intellectual dark web.
A term that's been thrown around a lot. The show positions itself as a boundary-free arena.
Yes. And what that means in practice is that it hosts left-wing voices, it hosts right-wing voices, and it hosts voices that are, frankly, way off the conventional map. It's become a place for people who might feel alienated or unrepresented by the mainstream consensus.
Which brings us to the Rogan effect. We really need to quantify this influence, because it can sound anecdotal until you look at the actual data.
The numbers are just staggering. I mean, by 2019, before the Spotify deal, he was already hitting 190 million downloads a month.
A month.
A month. The YouTube channel now has over 20 million subscribers and just billions and billions of views. But the influence goes way beyond just views. Look at book sales.
The kingmaker phenomenon.
Cornell University scholars actually studied this. They found a direct causal correlation.
Okay, give us an example.
Let's take Graham Hancock. He's an author who writes about alternative history, ancient civilizations, that sort of thing, often dismissed by mainstream academia.
Right.
After appearing on JRE, his book sales jumped 519% in 1 week.
519%. That's career-altering.
It is. It's the modern Oprah's book club. But instead of memoirs and novels being recommended to, say, housewives in the afternoon, it's astrophysics, nutrition, and ancient history being recommended to a largely young male demographic that publishers often completely ignore.
And it wasn't just him. Neil deGrasse Tyson, Phil McGraw.
They all see the spike. The Rogan bump is a real, measurable economic event.
And it extends beyond just products. It goes into lifestyle, too. Sober October is a real thing now.
It's a yearly tradition for thousands of his listeners, and it started just because Rogan and his comic friends Bert Kreischer, Tom Segura, Ari Shaffir decided to get fit for a month back in 2017.
It creates this sense of community.
A powerful one. But the influence also has a very sharp edge to it. It actually impacts the financial markets. We have to talk about episode 1169.
The Elon Musk episode. The blunt heard round the world.
It's iconic imagery now. Musk is on the show. Rogan offers him a blunt. Musk takes one puff on air.
And the result? Tesla stock dropped 9%.
Almost instantly.
That is just wild. Billions of dollars in market capitalization evaporated because a CEO hung out in his studio with a comedian.
It highlighted this collision of cultures. You have Wall Street watching this unregulated, chaotic podcast world and just freaking out. They didn't have a financial model that could price in CEO getting high on a podcast.
And then you have the whole Storm Area 51 phenomenon, which feels like a fever dream now, but that didn't just come from nowhere.
No, that traces directly back to episode 1315 with Bob Lazar and Jeremy Corbell.
Bob Lazar, the alleged Area 51 whistleblower.
That's him. That single episode has over 61 million views on YouTube alone. It completely reignited global interest in UFOs, and it directly inspired the Storm Area 51 meme event that followed.
So one conversation in a studio in California can spiral into a global movement.
That's the power we're talking about.
So he can sell books, he can tank stocks, he can start memes, but more recently, the stakes have gotten so much higher. We need to talk about Rogan as a political powerhouse. Because whether he wants to be one or not, he is one.
The New York Times labeled the podcast an unlikely political influencer all the way back during the 2020 election. And the data completely backs that up. You just have to look at Andrew Yang.
Yang was polling at, what, 0% basically? A total unknown?
A complete unknown outside of very niche tech circles. He goes on Rogan, he gets 2 or 3 hours to talk about universal basic income, and suddenly his fundraising jumps from like 62 donations a day to over 2,150 a day.
Wow.
He became a legitimate contender in those early primaries, almost purely off the back of that one appearance. He mainstreamed the idea of UBI.
And then there was the Bernie Sanders moment. Rogan just casually says he'd probably vote for Bernie.
And the Sanders campaign famously cut that clip and used it in an ad.
Which caused a civil war inside the Democratic Party.
It really did. Some progressives were absolutely furious that Sanders would tout an endorsement from someone with Rogan's, controversial history regarding transgender issues and other topics.
Yeah.
But the Sanders campaign ran the math.
What was the math?
Rogan reaches the exact voters they couldn't reach through MSNBC or an op-ed in the New York Times. Young men, independents, disillusioned voters.
And then as we get into the 2020 general election, there was almost a Trump-Biden debate on the podcast.
Almost. It was a bizarre sequence of events. Trump's campaign started tweeting clips of Rogan criticizing Biden's mental acuity. So Rogan, on air, just throws out this offer. He says he'll host a 4-hour debate. No moderator, just him, Trump, and Biden.
And Trump accepted.
On Twitter.
Yeah.
Immediately. Said he'd do it.
But of course it never happened. The Biden campaign, I assume, wanted no part of that.
No chance. But it set the stage for 2024.
The 2024 election. And the Trump episode finally happened. Episode 2219.
And it was a media earthquake. I mean, the numbers were just insane. It racked up 26 million views in just 24 hours on YouTube.
But it wasn't without drama. There was this whole issue where Rogan claimed YouTube was suppressing it in their search results.
Yes. A lot of users were reporting that they couldn't find the full episode when they searched for it. All they could find were clips from other news channels talking about it.
Yeah.
YouTube later came out and said it was a technical glitch and they fixed it, but Rogan didn't wait around.
He just uploaded the whole thing directly to X, what used to be Twitter.
The full 3-hour video. And it got another 18.4 million views there.
That was a flex. That was a power move.
It was him showing everyone that he doesn't need YouTube's distribution if you're going to play games.
Wow.
He has the power to bypass the established platforms because his audience will follow him anywhere.
But the content of the interview itself drew really heavy criticism. CNN did a fact check and reported that Trump made 32 false or misleading claims during the interview.
And this is the absolute core friction of the Rogan format. This is the central debate. Critics argue that by not fact-checking in real time, by not acting like a traditional journalist, he allows misinformation to spread unchecked to millions of potential voters. They say he provides a safe harbor for lies.
And the defense from his side?
The defense, from supporters and Rogan himself, is that the format is not about gotcha journalism. It's about letting the guests speak their mind for 3 hours, uninterrupted, so that the audience can judge for themselves who that person really is. If they lie, let them lie and trust the audience to figure it out.
It's worth noting, our sources say the Kamala Harris campaign also discussed an appearance.
They did, but apparently the scheduling couldn't be worked out. The reporting suggests the Harris campaign wanted a shorter duration or a specific location, and Rogan's camp has a firm policy. You come to Austin, and there's no time limit.
And they likely feared that progressive backlash, similar to what happened with Bernie Sanders?
Almost certainly. It was seen as too high risk.
But in the end, many media analysts are crediting Rogan's interviews with not just Trump, but also J.D. Vance as being key to reaching those young male voters in 2024.
The so-called bro vote. It is a massive and politically powerful demographic that traditional media outlets often struggle to connect with.
They don't watch cable news.
They don't read the Washington Post. They listen to podcasts on their way to work or at the gym, and Rogan has a direct, unfiltered line straight to them.
Okay. Now, we cannot have this conversation, this deep dive on Rogan, without talking about the controversies, and there have been. Well, a lot of them.
To put it mildly, yes. The COVID-19 era was really the flashpoint. That's when the fun hangout show became a genuine cultural and political battleground.
It started with the horse dewormer feud. That was the moment the mainstream media and Rogan really went to war with each other.
It was. So when Rogan contracted COVID, he announced that his treatment protocol included ivermectin. He said it was prescribed by a doctor. CNN's coverage and other outlets followed suit, repeatedly referred to it as a horse dewormer, because a formulation of the drug is used in veterinary medicine, even though there's also a human version.
And Rogan did not let that go.
No, he was furious. So when Dr. Sanjay Gupta, CNN's chief medical correspondent, came on the show, Rogan confronted him directly for several very uncomfortable minutes.
And he got him to admit it, didn't he?
He forced Gupta to admit, on air, that the network had been unfair in how they characterized the drug, that they shouldn't have said that. It was this rare viral moment of a podcaster holding a major news network accountable to their face.
But on the flip side of that, Rogan was getting a lot of heat for his comments about the vaccine itself.
Yes. He made a comment suggesting that young, healthy people didn't need to get the vaccine.
Which was widely criticized.
By Dr. Anthony Fauci, by the White House, by basically the entire medical establishment. Rogan did later walk it back a bit. He called himself a fucking moron and reminded people he's not a respected source of medical information.
Which is his go-to defense. I'm just a comedian.
It is, which works to a point. But then came the Dr. Robert Malone episode.
Right.
This was the one that really crossed the line for many people. Dr. Malone, a vaccine scientist himself, came on and compared U.S. pandemic policy to Nazi Germany. He used the term mass formation psychosis.
And the backlash to that was immediate and huge.
It was the breaking point. YouTube removed the episode from their platform. A group of 270 doctors and scientists signed an open letter to Spotify calling Rogan a menace to public health.
And this is when the musicians got involved. Neil Young,
and then Joni Mitchell pulled their entire music catalogs from Spotify in protest. They gave Spotify an ultimatum. It's him or me.
And Spotify chose Rogan.
They stood by their $200 million man. They did add content advisories to COVID-related episodes after the fact, but they refused to deplatform him. It showed very clearly where the power really lies in the modern music and audio industry.
Then, just as that controversy was starting to die down, the N-word compilation video surfaced.
This was in February of 2022. A video montage started circulating, created by a progressive PAC, showing Rogan using the N-word from various older episodes across many years.
Now, the context there is important.
It is. In the vast majority of the clips, he was quoting someone else or discussing the word itself, not using it as a direct slur against a person. But seeing it all cut together, back to back, it was shocking.
It looked bad.
It looked very, very bad. Rogan issued a lengthy apology on Instagram. He called his use of the word regretful and shameful. He said he hadn't used the word in years, but he acknowledged how damaging the compilation looked.
And this is one of the few times Spotify did take direct action.
They did. They removed roughly 70 episodes of the podcast from their platform. These were mostly older ones, predating 2020, that often featured controversial far-right guests like Milo Yiannopoulos or Gavin McInnes, or episodes where the language was deemed too insensitive.
And on top of all that, there have been these ongoing accusations of bigotry from people like Sunny Hostin on The View.
Yes, she's called him misogynistic, racist, and homophobic. There was significant controversy over his comments about the trans athlete Leah Thomas and his discussions with author Abigail Schreier regarding gender issues.
Yet through all of this, the boycotts, the open letters, the removed episodes, the media firestorms, he seems to just keep growing. His audience doesn't leave.
No, if anything, these events seem to solidify his base. The Spotify CEO, Daniel Ek, had to hold company-wide meetings to defend keeping the content. He cited the importance of not silencing voices you disagree with. And despite a lot of internal unrest at Spotify, the business logic held. Rogan was and is too big to fail for them.
So what is the legacy here? When we look back on this era, what does it all mean? We have this term, the intellectual dark web, that he's associated with.
It's this idea of a space for conversations that are too long, too nuanced, or just too controversial for mainstream television or print. Supporters see JRE as the last bastion of true free speech, a place where you can actually hear someone out for 3 hours without a commercial break or a pundit interrupting them.
And the critics, how do they see it?
Critics see it as a pipeline, a dangerous one. They argue that by giving a massive platform to fringe voices or by just asking questions about settled science, he legitimizes dangerous views and conspiracy theories. They see the boundary-free arena not as a virtue, but as a profound lack of responsibility.
But purely from a media business perspective, it is a total disruption.
It's a complete paradigm shift. There's no other way to describe it. It proved that long-form audio could not only compete with primetime cable news, but in many key demographics, it could actually beat it.
It feels like a fundamental shift from institutional authority to personality-driven authenticity.
That is the key.
Yeah.
That's it, exactly. We used to trust the news anchor because he had the suit, the polished desk, and the network logo behind him. That was the source of authority.
Right.
Now, a huge portion of the population trusts the podcaster because they feel authentic. They're drinking whiskey, they're swearing, they're messing up their words. It feels real in a way that polished media doesn't anymore.
And this isn't just an American phenomenon. We saw in the sources there's a mention of Wolfgang Wee in Norway.
The Norwegian Joe Rogan. It's a format that is being replicated all over the world. Long, unstructured conversations, minimal editing, driven entirely by the personality of the host and their guests.
So we've traced this whole thing from the grainy Ustream days to this $250 million global empire. It's a place for bros to hang out, and it's also the most coveted political platform in America.
It's a place for cutting-edge science and a place for wild conspiracy theories. It is a total paradox. Highbrow and lowbrow, often in the same episode, sometimes in the same sentence.
And that leads us to the final big question. As traditional media continues to fracture and break apart, and as figures like Rogan become these undisputed kingmakers, does their responsibility change?
But that is the question of our time, I think. When you have a bigger audience than CNN, are you still just a guy talking in a room? Or do you at some point acquire a duty to the truth that goes beyond, I'm just asking questions?
It's something for you, the listener, to think about. If the future of information is a comedian in a bunker in Texas, what does that really mean for all of us?
It means the entire conversation is changing. And we all need to become better listeners, but also much better critical thinkers.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
See you next time.